Hello, hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Wednesday. So, yeah, we're kind of easing back into streaming here after we finished our Equinox event. We're basically just getting everything back in order, cleaning the studio up, preparing our next offerings. And so that means I was going to have a video game stream today. I'm trying to figure out how to hook up the PlayStation 5 to my Stream Deck so that I was going to stream Karma the Dark World, which is a super awesome looking game that I just got. Yes, hello, Alex. Yes, that is my name. Yes, hello. So, yeah, I was going to stream. Very good. Thank you. Thank you in advance, Lodi. So, yeah, I was going to stream Karma the Dark World today, which is an awesome looking Chinese game that is set in East Berlin in the 1980s and is about 1984. So I definitely am curious to see, as a horror game, I'm hoping to get some horror game streaming going for October because it's after the equinox, it's officially spooky fall, my favorite ever season. So definitely curious to see how that game is, but I couldn't really get it set up in time. So we're just going to do an open session here where you can ask me anything. I may do some tarot readings. In fact, let's set the goal. Let's see. So we will do any $10 for a tarot reading. Make sure to put your question in as to what you want to see. In your super chat. Obviously, it's, as usual, there's more happenings. Thank you, Occultology. What's up with the 12 angelic kings of the Aethers? What the? Are you talking about the governors of the Aethers? The kings are not, as far as I know, the kings are not in the Aethers. They are in the tablets. Maybe send me a link that talks about that. It's been a long time since I've done Enochian. So yeah, super chat for a tarot reading. Let me go grab my tarot deck so I make sure I have it. In the meantime, throw some questions out. Occultology says, know the angelic kings. They have zodiacal correspondences. They're in Lon's book. Answer, I don't know. Love you too, William. I don't know. So that would be a Lon question. Are you talking about Enochian vision magic? Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. I'm sure I've got it on a is Jimmy Kimmel magic. Man, I gotta say, 3 days of no Jimmy Kimmel and the normies lost their minds. Things were feeling really, really, really hostile out in the Aethers. The Ether, rather, not the Aethers. And I couldn't figure out why, because it was more hostile. It was like as hostile as it was in COVID, the psychic airwaves. And it was more hostile than after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I was sitting there like everything was. I don't know if you ever get this where you just like pick up on vibes, man. But I was getting the heebie-jeebies. I was walking outside. People were aggressive. There was just all this anger in the air. And then I realized what was going on. The normies had their normie slop taken away. The inmates had their meds taken away. Jimmy Kimmel's gone for 3 days. And the world melts down. Interestingly there, I think there's a point to be made where Americans really only care about politics when it interrupts their entertainment. Or like if Netflix, like we almost had a revolution just on Netflix increasing their streaming charges. Navbav D says, will you ever be re-uploading your stream about the 764 investigation? It's still up. You just have to be a channel member to watch it. Alex asks, what are your thoughts on mediumship, and are there any legit mediums out there? Yes, there are definitely legit mediums. They tend to call themselves trance channels these days. I am with Crowley on that question, though, where he basically said that mediums just indiscriminately open themselves up willy-nilly to anything, like, hello, is there a presence there? And that means that they have no idea what they're dealing with. And often you get lower elementals pretending to be Aunt Ethel or whoever deceased person you're trying to get through to. So I think that for that reason, ceremonial magic, particularly with the extensive use of pentagram rituals and Kabbalistic targeting and things like that, is much preferable to mediumship, because you have the phone number for what you're calling, and you have a set of tests to check you're getting what you're getting. Otherwise, it's anything goes, and that's how you end up in Insidious 2. There is an interesting book that came out a while ago by the late Jerry Cornelius called Aleister Crowley and the Ouija Board, that was put out by Feral House. Which is an interesting book. It's not a method I've tried, but it talks about how, I believe in his latter days, Crowley was working with Frater Akkad, Charles Stansfield Jones, with the Ouija board. They got very into it, but they were working with it in a way that they would put the Ouija board into a triangle, evoke a specific, basically call a specific being into the Ouija board, and then talk to it that way. Often an angel, and they reported very, very good results with that. So that's an interesting take on it. That to me seems much more straightforward and let's see, much more professional. Houdini asks, did you ever do an interview with Tobias Churton on Crowley in America? Can't find it on YouTube. Yes, I have. I don't think it's on YouTube, but it is on my podcast. So just Ultra Culture with Jason Louv on iTunes. And hopefully we will be starting that up again soon. ParaInso0 asks, what are the 231 gates? Are you referring to Liber 231, the Crowley book, Liber Arcanorum, in which case they are the genie of the tarot, including the Avverse genie. Steve asks, can I throw out some Christian mysticism, Catholic rites for protection? Sure, why not? Dustin asks, want to get high? Quite often, yes. Yeah, I wish I knew more. Well, you know what? Let's since you did super chat also, let's look up the 12 angelic kings of the Aethers, just to jog my memory, so I can give you a more intelligent answer. Okay. Well, Google Gemini at least says the governors and the entire system of the Aethers are in turn correlated with and governed by a higher order of 12 angelic kings. These kings are associated with the 12 tribes of Israel and the astrological aspects of the system. Okay, well, that's super interesting. Clearly that is... Just to jog my memory, can you give me the names of a few of them? Just because there's so many different orders of angels in that system. If I see the names, that'll probably jog my memory better. Ah, thank you, Kelly. Much appreciated. Long overdue. Your Enter the Magic Circle meditation has been a huge tool in my magic toolbox for years, so thank you. You're quite welcome. What magic book had the most impact on you during your journey? The Occult by Colin Wilson. I mean, we could talk about books forever. If you guys just want to ask me about books, we could talk about books forever. The Occult by Colin Wilson. When I was first getting interested in magic, I was 16, I think, and I had no idea whether magic was actually real or not. I went to the public library, and they just had a copy of The Occult by Colin Wilson, which was written in the late 60s, and advances a theory that occult systems throughout history, particularly as practiced by people, luminaries like Crowley, Blavatsky, and so on, are actually ways of tapping into what Wilson called Faculty X, which for him is a special certain something that geniuses can access. It's basically that there is something about the human nervous system or psychology that at the very, very high register, where therapy is concerned with low registers and bringing them up to the average. But the idea of Faculty X and the human potential movement that was starting around the same time, and the idea that's driven my entire career and personal quest, is the idea of how can we advance the human mind to levels beyond what is considered normal capacitation for human cognition, and more importantly, are there methods by which we can do that and replicate from person to person? And I can pretty clearly say at this point, yes, there are. And so Wilson didn't have it all quite in order in the occult, but there's enough in that book that I was able to take it seriously as an actual pursuit. And most critically, the idea, I'm sure you've all heard the Isaac Asimov quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I think it's quite likely that in the future, assuming we have a future, because we may just end up in a new dark age, but if we get a Hail Mary pass here, and it's looking less and less likely, unfortunately, and we don't end up in some, Islamic theocratic hell world, or just globalist lockdown 1984, COVID-style nightmare, I think that people of the future, certainly psychologists of the future, will look back and say, what human beings in the past considered the occult or magic were rudimentary attempts at this unlocking of Faculty X or unlocking of higher human psychological functioning. And I still stand by that to this day. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. And so that would be my answer. The Occult by Colin Wilson. Still a great book. Highly recommend it to everyone. Okay. Christina, hello, asks, top 5 books on magic, recommendations besides Crowley, Robert Anton Wilson, and Donald Michael Craig. Okay, let me think. Liber Null and Psychonaut by Peter J. Carroll. That's a great book to get started with. Outside of mine, right? I can just tell you my books. Let's see. So Liber Null and Psychonaut. So we're not doing Crowley, Donald Michael Craig, or Robert Anton Wilson. Okay, I don't know. I don't think that Robert Anton Wilson or Donald Michael Craig would be on the top 5 anyways. And Crowley, I would say book 4, but we can set that aside for now. So let me think. Liber Null and Psychonaut, The Magician's Dictionary by E. E. Remus, which has been out of print since the 90s, unfortunately. Let me think. The Golden Dawn, Israel Regardie, start with that. There's the 7th edition, John Michael Greer. That's a great one. I mean, if you pick up The Golden Dawn, you've got, let's say 80 to 90% of what you're going to get in the New Age marketplace, and most of what you're going to get in Crowley, and certainly everything you're going to get in Donald Michael Craig. What you're not going to get is sex magic, but outside of that, it's got everything. And often at a much higher intellectual level and level of detail than you get in rehashes. I was talking to somebody at the during the equinox working about this, who was lamenting how, and I won't name them, but who was lamenting how many modern occult books are just leftist diatribes, which is unfortunately true. And but they're not. They're and this is the thing that I love about, and this has been the case for occult publishing since the 80s. You pick up these books that have like a little tiny fragment of Golden Dawn or Crowley in it, and then it's like, half of the book will be the author saying things like, but whatever you feel is right. But do it your own way. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. The fuck there isn't. There is a right or wrong way to do things. And so you get lazy ass occult writers recycling old stuff from Victorian England, and then just splashing their personality all over it and calling it new. It's worthless. It just kills trees. So what have we said so far? Libernal and Psychonaut, The Golden Dawn by Rigardi, The Magician's Dictionary by E. E. Remis. I just like for the vibe of that guy. The Process by Brian Geisen, the novel, hard to find these days. That's an excellent one. Let's see. I don't even have my occult books in the same room as me, so I'm trying to really think here. Yeah, I mean, we could break down on use value or vibiness, but I will say, why not? The Invisibles on Omnibus by Grant Morrison. I just reread that in omnibus format. Phenomenal. Very 90s, but it was wonderful to go back and get some of that, the vibe of that comic that inspired me so much as a teenager. For me, reading The Invisibles by Grant Morrison was like seeing the Beatles on Sullivan, and I told them as much. Okay, let's see. MDA question. One time you said, I'm not sure what the question is. SN Snagdy says, what do you think of using LLMs as a divination vessel, similar to the idea of calling angels into a Ouija board in a triangle? Any experience with calling beings into an LLM? Not with calling beings into an LLM, but of course, look, AI and Magick is something we talk a lot about on the Discord, which you should all be subscribed to. If you're not on the Discord, I will put the link one more time. Let me pull up the invite link because it's out of control over there. But the combination of, here's your Discord link in the chat. Please join us. The combination. Oh, what the hell? The combination of Magick and AI is, of course, a subject of primary fascination to me. All right, let's see. Dustin says, I particularly think that meditation methods and psychedelics are going to heavily facilitate that. Facilitate what? Occultology says Olpagid, Zarna, etc. It's still not ringing a bell. Yeah, I don't want to give you a half-baked answer. I'm sorry. But yeah, all questions of all practical questions on the operation of Enochian magic. Your first port of call is Enochian Vision Magic by Lon Duquette. Stephen Skinner is also very, very good on it. Practical magic of the angelic tables. Athena666 says, one time you said you saw people who were not there on MDA like true hallucination. Yes, that's true. I did. That was a long time ago. You must have heard that on a podcast or something. I too had that experience and simply want to hear more about it from your experience. Yeah, I had a very, very strange, this was back in New York in the mid-2000s, where I was on MDA, and I saw the spirit of a dead shaman with with animal skins and antlers and all this stuff slowly emerging from a chair. It was wild. And then I ended up closing my eyes, and I ended up in some bizarre, abstruse dimension that had aliens in it that were looking at me. One of them looked at me and said, "What the fuck are you doing here? You do not belong here. Get out." That was a pretty wild experience. Sutek says, "I'm a Tai Chi practitioner." Very cool. It's helped me immensely. Mind-body connection is way beyond understanding. I totally agree. Very, very cool. Elias says, "Are there any fiction books that get magic right besides Diary of a Dope Fiend?" There's tons. There's tons. In terms of get magic right, there's William Burroughs books are pretty good, particularly his final trilogy, Cities of the Red Knight, and The Place of Dead Roads, and The Western Lands. Philip K. Dick's stuff is great. His final trilogy, Valis, The Divine Invasion, and The Transmigration of Timothy Archer. For pure occult fiction, Dion Fortune. Dion Fortune, because she was Dion Fortune. She was one of the most preeminent practitioners of the 20th century. She wrote tons of fiction on magic. So, The Sea Priestess, the Goat-Footed God, and so forth. The Secrets of Dr. Tavener, I think, is one of them. So Dion Fortune is excellent. Grant Morrison stuff, obviously. Again, The Process by Brian Geisen that I mentioned. There's a lot of books where people have tried to get magic right, but have fallen short. One notable failure that was still nonetheless very cool and vibey was Shaman Space by Steve Aylett, who some of you may recognize if you're into very, very obscure British psychedelic writers. There's tons. There's tons. Grendel by John Gardner. That's a great one. The Magus, John Fowles. That I recommend. The Magus by John Fowles. Steve D says, "I like St. Michael's Prayer for banishing specifically demonic energy, and St. Benedict's medal for times like these. The medal is basically a talisman and can be performed just like the LBRP." So I gather people are also feeling stressed by the psychic airwaves. Just purchase Golden Dawn by Rigardi. Well, you can't go wrong. Golden Dawn. If you really want to do magic, if you really want to take it seriously and really commit to it as a course of study, and go to the primary sources and learn the techniques and do it the ceremonial way instead of the chaos way, right? If you're ready for that at that stage of your journey, just get the Golden Dawn by Rigardi and work through it. If you want to join a Golden Dawn group and go through the temple initiations, great. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. The Golden Dawn by Rigardi is the textbook of magic. If you want to go back further, you can go to Agrippa, 3 books of occult philosophy. But the Golden Dawn, which is perhaps a bit more authentic to European traditions, but whereas the Golden Dawn very much relies on Mather's syncretic system that he put together in the British Library. But as far as I'm concerned, there really hasn't been a lot of there hasn't been a whole lot of new that is of note since the Golden Dawn, and I consider Crowley and Fortune part of the Golden Dawn since they were initiates. Chaos magic was very interesting as an approach, and the chaos current itself was awesome. But the chaos magic was more culturally based, and it was coming at it from a deconstructed postmodern lens, which was fascinating for the time, but can only take you so far. At some point, you have to actually study the material. Picatrix, yeah, I think most people will suggest that the Picatrix is like one of the top books on magic. I don't actually have a copy, and I haven't worked with it. So, Frauder RC says, "Sadly, Greer intentionally added errors to the 7th edition." What the? He changed things based on his own desires, which really is not the job of an editor. That is very disappointing. I'm curious what errors he added and why. Well, we're up to 7 editions by now, so I'm curious, since Frauder RC is in the Golden Dawn, I'm curious what edition you like the best. Slim Jim says, Jason, in your discovery of having Nordic roots, if it's not too personal to ask, have you had any personal psychedelic experiences referencing werewolves in the Nordic Viking context? No. No, but if you have, that's very cool. Black Cat says, have you read a book called Fresh Fever from the Skies? If so, what's your take? I'm assuming you mean by IA 0131. I like IA 131 a lot. I really do. I think he should probably stop lamenting that Thelema is so moribund and essentially a dead current, and just get on with his own writing and explicating of the current, because I think he's great. And I think he's got really good takes on things. I haven't read the whole book, but I've got a copy in the other room, and I rate his stuff very highly. Oh, here's a question. I wonder what Magick will be like in 100 years, or what it will eventually evolve into. Very interesting question. I think that it very much depends on how history goes. I think that Magick will be ubiquitous in everything. It kind of already is. I think that it will be very much integrated with technology. It will be very much... but I think that in a way, if you look at our society now, there's magic everywhere. And there's lots of different versions of it. You've got magic on the right, magic on the left. You've got magic of the rich. You've got magic of the poor. So it'll just be everywhere, and it probably won't be called magic. And I think we're already in that world. You have tech bros into psychedelics and manifesting, and you maybe you wouldn't, but some very, very interesting people in very, very high places throughout this world have taken my classes. So I think that it will be more widely accepted. And my hope for Magick in 100 years is that, for instance, first, that it hasn't been stamped out by theocracy or communism, which is also possible, as happened in China and Russia. So assuming we don't get some kind of unholy Marxist, Islamo-fascist world, then my hope for it is that it will be much more widely and openly studied and practiced in a serious way. And this is largely what we're trying to build with Magick Me and the Discord. I would love to see real academies of magic in the way that, almost like Harry Potter, but groups of people taking it seriously. And I would like to see people assessing all of the techniques of altered consciousness and magic using modern technology and empirical rigor. And we do this at Magick.me, and hopefully Magick.me will still be going in 100 years. That's up to you guys, of course. Justin says, I really enjoyed the Psychic Bible by Genesis Purge, which yours truly spent 5 years of his life putting together and editing. Very good. Noodles of Mateo says, I'm in the middle of reading Uncertain Places by Mitch Horowitz, and it's a refreshing perspective for seekers. Yeah, I really like Mitch. Mitch is great and is sincere, and that's rare. And I very much like Mitch's very, very his very, very hardcore stance against cynicism. I greatly admire about him. He's a good. Mitch is a good as I've told him. Mitch is a good influence on all of us. Yeah, Frauder RC says, given how little magic has changed. Let me back up a bit. Oh, there's a bunch of questions. Oh, I'm way behind. Given how little magic has changed the past 2,000 years, it will probably continue to maintain the same core features and practices. Yeah, I mean, people will still be doing Golden Dawn and Thelema and all of that. All right. Christina, who is the author of The Process? Brian Geisen, William Burroughs' collaborator. Thank you for the super chat. the evolution of us into a new species. I don't think that human beings will evolve into a new species. I do think that some people, particularly the rich, will be able to use genetic engineering and technology to functionally appear as something more than human. But as we see, they will have very, very limited imagination in what they do with that. Dan Herm asks, what non-occult philosopher worldview do you think is the most accurate or that interests you the most? Oh, man. Well, first of all, almost all philosophers, wittingly or no, have some overlap with occultism, particularly in the West. As far as most accurate, I'm not sure that philosophy is necessarily about accuracy. It depends on the philosophy and the philosopher. You can't go wrong with the classics. Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. Plato's great, you know. So my initial response would be Plato. I like the German idealists. Nietzsche I like a lot, although he's misused. I think that for approaching magic, Nietzsche is still very, very good. The idea that you know, and is very much in line with what I was talking about with Colin Wilson. Colin Wilson was an existentialist philosopher in England in the 50s as a young man. Nietzsche's idea of the overman or the superman, the idea that man is a halfway creature that is held back by social conditioning, which is, you know, small-minded bourgeois thinking, which in Nietzsche's day was largely religious, but in our day is largely leftist communism, okay? The new religion. I think that is an accurate take on things. And I think that you could do worse than to go back and reread Nietzsche's core theses. Christopher said, did you see She Is Still Here? I think so. Is that the one? It's either that one or a different one where there's a shot of a party in Jen's backyard and I'm in it. If it's that one, then I saw it. Otherwise, I don't know. Yes. Okay. So, yeah, Frauder. It looks like Frauder RC is the one to ask about Enochian. He's throwing out the info on the 12 tribes. Slacker Slack says, if we were to eventually hit cyborg levels, imagine instantly being able to activate total focus or instantly hit profound levels of consciousness. Yeah, although you'll probably be getting advertisements in the middle of it. The Red Lion by Maria Sepes is one of the best occult accounts. I've never heard of it. Very cool. Here we go, Athena. What about this one? Ketamine is a big thing these days. Have you used it in a magic practice, or is it too easy to slip down the ski slope, so to speak, and just use it to blast away from reality? Here's the deal with all substances. Yes, all substances can be used for magic. Ketamine has been very popular over the last 10 years. It is not a harmless drug. It can have serious effects on your digestion. It can be very, very hard on your kidneys, on your bladder. I don't recommend use of ketamine. In fact, I don't recommend any substance. I recommend learning to do magic on its own, because you don't actually need substances for magic. And generally, what tends to happen is people become reliant on them. Is there an alternative to therapy? Yes, there's tons. But therapy's good too. Max says, I was just raised to the 3rd degree in my Masonic Lodge. Congratulations, that's a huge achievement. I'm keen to start checking out appendant bodies, but others in the lodge suggest that I rotate through the offices first. Thoughts? Up to you, I would say. I think that if in terms of the amount of time that masonry requires, it's probably one or the other. if you want to be involved in masonry long term, then I would probably listen to your lodge mates and go up the line. I never did it. Justin says I really enjoyed Carlos Castaneda's books. I take them as fiction. Yeah, yeah. Is asana an absolute must? I have a sore knee. Yes, but you can find a position that works for you, like Godasana, for instance. Are you a fan of Liam Christopher's Kabbalah Magic book? Never heard of it. Occultology. Okay, I got some more super chats. Thank you guys. Let's do the super chats. Occultology. Talk about the value of a magical journal. Well, I mean, without a magic journal, you're fooling yourself, and you cannot see the patterns that you. It's real simple. Without a magic journal, you have no ability to zoom out and see the larger patterns. That's it. You know, you can maybe remember your current experiences for the next 24 hours, but you can't. You have no. It's all going to go, right? You're not going to remember it, so you have no ability to look out and see what you're actually doing. Alex says, do you still consider chaos magic as a legit practice, perhaps as the path that will help evolve these teachings for the future? Yeah, I mean, of course I do. I think that chaos magic is, but chaos magic itself is not a spiritual path. It's a meta approach to magic, and I think that calling it meta magic, as Phil Farber has, is a better way to look at it. Meta magic meaning it is an approach to learning and spanning lots and lots of magical systems to see the commonalities and points of difference. And so I think that for the internet era, and for an era in which we have much, much easier access to traditional teachings because of globalization, it's a very good approach. I don't think that chaos magic per se I think that the chaos magic approach has now been so absorbed into everything else that chaos magic itself may no longer be, I don't think is really necessary for its own. It's not really necessary anymore. I think it did its job. And I think that people de facto take a chaos approach to things. But yeah, I mean, it is and should always stay part of the magical toolkit. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Fraud RC recommends the Cicero's Golden Dawn self-initiation. I have not worked through that one, but I've heard good things. Did you try the authentic Enochian stuff? Yes, I did, for many, many years, about 20 years. Although I can't remember the 12 Kings. Josh, what are your thoughts on blinds or intentional misdirects in Golden Dawn system material? I don't know. It sounds like Frauder RC is the one to ask about that. People talk about blinds in Crowley. As far as I can tell with Crowley, I don't think the main blinds, so to speak, in Crowley are when he's being coy about OTO sex magic because he's under oath. Okay, let me do super chats first. Thank you very much, Christopher, saying thanks for the conversation and insight. You're quite welcome. Thank you, Steve. Much, much appreciated. Very honorable Frauder DLS. Thank you very much. Frauder, thank you, says Greer added black and white checkered floors just because he likes them or something, or because it's Masonic. Interesting. Okay. Is there a memory palace tradition in magic? Well, yeah, I mean, it comes out of the magical tradition. It's Giordano Bruno, right? Where they use it as a tool. Yeah, look up Giordano Bruno. I think Francis, or Dame Frances Yates wrote a whole book about it. How do I feel about Neville Goddard? I know Mitch loves him. I've never read Neville Goddard's stuff. I know that people really, really like him, but I'm not the person to ask about him. So Frauder says 6th edition is the best, but they all have errors, which is why comparison to Zalewski's Golden Dawn rituals and commentary 3rd edition is essential. I can give more info on Greer's 7th edition in the Discord. Very interesting. I'm curious if there's a bunch of Golden Dawn stuff that is not in the Golden. And P.S. The papers, the grade papers in the Golden Dawn book, and maybe Fraud RC can speak to this, are not the original Golden Dawn grade papers. They're the grade papers of the Stella Matutina, which was the New Zealand. I don't necessarily want to say branch of the Golden Dawn, but it was an order that was formed and carried on into the future, doing work on into the 50s by Golden Dawn initiates. But I'm curious also, Frauder RC, if there's like higher grade material that was left out or is not widely accessible to the public. Devin Programming says, I'm thinking about starting the Wealth Magic Ritual by Damon Brand. I don't know. I'd never read his books. Have I read the Grand Grimoire? I'm sure I did at some point, but I'm not big on Grimoire magic. Why am I so worried about Islamofascism? It's real simple. Under Islam, well, there's a lot of reasons, okay? But under Islam, which has a zero tolerance policy on magic and paganism, I will be killed and you will be killed. That's enough of a reason to be worried about it. You know, in a majority Muslim society, I will be killed, my family will be killed, all my students will be killed, and my life's work will be erased. So that's going to be a no for me, dog. Thank you, Maria. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Who was Damien Eccles' tutor? You would have to read his books or ask him. Aeon Archon says magic shouldn't be mainstream. I don't think it ever will be. But yeah, I mean, of course, there's a real argument to be made that it should be kept secret. I think that it will always, magic always defends itself simply because it requires too much attention span for most people to assess. But yeah. Thank you, Alex Prenzler. Much appreciated. Okay. Nietzsche was a classicist. That's very interesting. In what way? Man is a bridge between animal and Ubermensch, yes. Slim Jim says, the idea of Magick.me being around for the next 100 years and more is beautiful. Let's get it. Working on it. Like I said, it's up to you guys. Join the Discord. We're constantly trying to build the community up. We're trying to do something new for the internet age, and doing pretty well at it so far, I think. But ultimately, that depends on the enthusiasm of the people that are involved. Okay, let's see. Frauder says, it's a misconception there are blinds in actual Golden Dawn material. There was no need, of course, because it was secret. Around 40% is still unpublished. Interesting. Can you give us any hints as to what that might be and who might have it? Jord, thank you, says, where do we send interview requests? Would you be willing to speak to a magical practitioner if they were right wing? I don't see why not, but it depends on what the outlet is. But you can email support@magick.me would be the best way to send a request. Thank you, Frauder, for all the memberships. He was a classicist like Heidegger. Interesting. Read The Birth of Tragedy. It's about the history of Greek tragedy. Interesting. Slacker Slack says, magic should definitely be kept secret. I tried to explain or talk about it before. You're immediately seen as a lesser idiot or that you have psychosis. Well, that's not the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing is the wrong people getting hold of it. But yes. Are pep rallies a good template as to how to perform a group ritual? How much of Crowley's magic is in Scientology? Not directly. It's more like Hubbard took a bunch of terminology And like, for instance, instead of OTO, there's OT levels. There's structural things. I don't think that there's any there. I don't think that he really ported anything directly, as much as he took whatever he could from Parsons OTO and made his own version of it. But largely, I think he was interested in the hierarchical control aspects. One of Damien Eccles' teachers was Stephen Mace. Yeah. Great writer that you don't hear of very often. Any recommendations on documentaries on Magick? No. You're never going to get a good documentary about Magick. It's not something that can be filmed. It's something that occurs internally. Who's my favorite occultist magician of all time? Me. We have a bunch of ridiculous anti-Semitic stuff. Yeah, Kyler makes the good point. Isn't psychosis the norm now? Yeah. That's the thing. Occult people are so shockingly sane compared to the average person these days. C.F. Russell. I'm interested in your take on C.F. Russell, Maria. He always struck me as kind of schizo. Kind of schizo, and I wouldn't necessarily call the Karanzan Club a good legacy, being that it gave us Michael Berdio, and was, as far as I can tell, just basically like a gay hookup thing in San Diego in the 50s. I have read C.F. Russell's stuff. I've read Barbara Cubed, and I don't think I've ever seen a copy of Znoose's Knees, but I've read the PDFs. Interesting, all the stuff about Chinese and I Ching and mathematics is interesting, but it's hard to tell how much is legitimate and how much is schizo. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. And what, if you've been able to get anything of use out of it. It's definitely, Russell stuff is definitely interesting just for being that out there. Am I familiar with Dennings and Phillips' work, like Mysteria Magica? Yeah. I think their stuff is great. I haven't worked through their system or the Ogdoad tradition or anything like that, but they're great writers on magic. Maria says, thinking backwards in Liber Thisharb, however that's pronounced, contributed to auditing tech. Okay, that makes sense. Contributed to auditing techniques. Iwas is Xenu. Shots fired. Fraud RC says the RR at AC paper on scrying the Aethers were burned, but known from diary entries and living members still alive. But we only know of it mainly through Crowley's famous use. Interesting. So that would then suggest that Crowley's claim to have essentially to literally have become a secret chief by working the 30 Aethers. He certainly wasn't. At least we can say perhaps he wasn't unique in that. Thank you, Justin, for the gift memberships. Ashley says, as someone devoted to the Babylon current, I'm curious from your perspective, how can we best help those around us through her? As accessibly as we can connect, the better right now for all. Thank you. You'll have to ask her. I mean, there's instructions in the Book of Babylon in Liber 49. Alex says, what's your opinion on? But I think the Babylon current is very, very, the 156 current, if you will, is bigger and better all the time. Alex says, what's your opinion on Martinism? I've met some people in Martinist orders in Europe. As far as I know, it's still pretty active. But I don't know that much about them, and I don't necessarily know enough to make give you an educated opinion. Thinking Backwards is also in the 1 equals 10 grade material, but not published in Regardie. Interesting. So I'm curious, Frauder RC, what of Crowley is actually original? And are the original parts all from Alan Bennett? That I'm curious about. Juan Jose Castro says, is Technosis worth reading? I've actually never read it. It's very, I would suspect it's very much an artifact of its time. I'm sure it's interesting historically, but let's just put it this way. Psychedelic burners in California did not end up steering the future. The grade lessons of the Outer Order and even the exams stayed the same from Golden Dawn to Stella Matutina and even Mather's AO, Alpha and Omega. Okay. When I wrote John Dee and the Empire of Angels, what was your favorite source? The original diaries. That's the beauty of Dee. He wrote it all down. So Stephen Skinner and Joseph Peterson's published stuff. I want to better the union of spirit and body, says Michael. Are there any visualizations to do while working out that might further that union? Well, you could just use the mind to help you work out. Schwarzenegger used to say he visualized each rep completing successfully, so just tie your mind to what you're doing. Justin says, Martinism is esoteric Masonic Christian angel magic. So fascinating, very interesting. Slacker Slack says, do you think a Messiah-type figure will come about at some point? God, I hope not. Perhaps in our lifetime. Seems like we're ripe for it, but who knows? I worry it could be orchestrated if needed to control. There have been lots of attempts. I mean, I know that there was an attempt to create... There have been a ton of attempts to create messianic figures. The Theosophists tried it with Krishnamurti. It went terribly, particularly because they were molesting him. Charles Ledbetter was. There was an attempt by a guy named Benjamin Krem to push this Maitreya future Messiah. That went nowhere. I hope not. We don't need messiahs. We've had enough. Kyler says, after achieving major milestones in practice, such as knowledge and conversation, is it normal to be stuck in a rut or become energetically deflated? How should one push through plateaus? Yeah, of course it is, because you've pushed your nervous system into a new zone. Go watch the video that I did on Monday, the Dark Night of the Soul video. We talk a lot about that in there. Anything to be said about Demeter and Persephone in the equinox? Yeah, we just did a whole workshop about it. Literally a whole 3-day workshop that we ended on Monday. Is it possible to make the chats accessible on replay for members? I think you can do that already. YouTube allows you to do that. You just need to turn it on. All right. Have I read any Marshall McLuhan? Yeah. If so, any thoughts on his work? I mean, it's important for media studies. I think that it is also very much of its time. But yeah, Marshall, he's not magical, but he's good to read. Plenty of monetized messiahs on Instagram and TikTok to choose from. Yeah, we don't need more. We really don't. I get heat rash from doing the LBRP. Is that known to be common at all? No, you might want to look at other things going on. You may want to do just a general health check, or if you're taking vitamins that you have an allergic to reaction to or something like that. No, that is not normal. Have you ever done banishing spells to remove negative and toxic people from your life, etc. routinely? Do you condone it if needed? Absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to put up with people's bullshit. You really don't. There's no rule saying you have to tolerate people's insanity. All right. Well, yes, Kyler says, isn't part of magic about becoming your own messiah? Yeah, for yourself. Save yourself because no one else is going to do it. That's kind of the idea. All right, everyone. This was a good open Q&A session. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating and your great questions and insights. I appreciate it as always. I enjoy seeing all of you on a semi-daily basis. All right. Lots of love, everyone. Please join the Discord. I'm going to post the link again. Here's the Discord. So make sure that you are hanging out with us in there. And hopefully, if I can get the PlayStation to work, we'll be doing some game streams. But otherwise, we will be doing other streams. All right. All right. Join the Discord. Have a great night. And